Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lynn Gardner. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon. It's great to have you here. We have an exciting topic here. The title of this is Honey, I Poisoned the Kids. And I think that by the time we get through this call, you're going to see what I'm talking about. And I hope that I'm going to raise some awareness because it's never too late to make some changes. But before we get going, I want to be sure that we've done a little bit of housekeeping here. I want to let you know that you're all muted out, so you won't be able to pipe in as I do the call, but I do want to encourage you to ask questions. So if you have any questions along the way, you'd like to put them on the screen there, you see your panel, and you can raise your hand and let me know they're there. If there's time before we conclude the call, I'm glad to answer them. And if not, I'm certainly happy to answer them outside of this call. You'll have my email address if that will be helpful to you. But I always like to set the purpose up so people know what we're about, what we're doing. And the purpose of this call, quite frankly, is to share my journey with you. Because I believe that that's how people learn and that's how people grow, is by others sharing their journey with them. So I'm going to give you a snapshot of my journey to show you what's inspiring me. And this call is intended to inspire you to make changes. I've made some drastic changes. If you knew me before my journey and after my journey, you would know the changes that I've made. But I really want to inspire you to make changes as well. And this call is intended to open your eyes about environmental issues that impact you and your family. And this call primarily is for our children and for our children's children. That's where my passion is. I feel like if we're not willing to make changes for ourselves, I guess we're entitled to do that. But when it impacts our children and our children's children, we certainly need to do something about it. I also like to set the stage so you know who you're talking to. A lot of you on the call today don't know me, so I want to set the stage for you and let you know that I'm not a physician, I'm not a scientist, I don't make medical claims whatsoever, and I'm really not easily swayed. I'm really a born skeptic, so the things that I'm going to share with you today, I just didn't buy off on and go with some conspiracy theory. I've done my homework, my research, and it wasn't easy to sway me over into the side of wellness and awareness. And frankly, I'm making up for lost time and bad judgment with my own family because I do believe, in a way, I have poisoned my kids, and I'm making up for lost time. So I'm an advocate for children, my grown children, my unborn grandchildren, your children, all children. I'm an advocate for children everywhere and consider myself in some ways to be a voice for them. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I'm on a mission. And when I wrote this, I was thinking about a statement that was made as part of a political campaign where it was said that the difference between a soccer mom, and a pit bull is lipstick, and that's about the difference here. I'm not like a pit bull on a mission, and I talk about this subject day in and day out, and I'm not going to stop because I am like a pit bull on a mission. But I'm a believer that we can all make a difference, and one life at a time. If I've made a difference in my family and I continue to make a difference for my own family, that's wonderful. And if I can change even one life beyond that and turn that around physically and to a point of wellness, then it's certainly all worthwhile. And I'm a person of hope. My journey is I've been a single mom for as long as I can remember. My kids were 2, 4, 6, and 8. When I found myself solo with them. In fact, we usually have a nice little song that we sing about that. But I raised the kids single-handedly in every aspect, financially, physically, spiritually, in every way. So I had quite of a load. And then I also cared for my aging parents until they passed. So needless to say, my life has been a roller coaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. I worked in another career, and I commuted an hour to an hour and a half to my office, and I had, all-star baseball players and schedules like you can't believe. So sadly enough, because of that, because of the madness of my life, convenience was my primary focus. My family enjoyed good health, so I didn't worry about it. What I didn't see couldn't hurt me, right? Everybody looked good, smelled good, acted good, everything was good. I didn't worry about it. Personally, I seldom visited a doctor. I lived my life with crisis management, basically. If I had a major issue, of course, I would have gone to the doctor. But I don't go looking for trouble. In fact, I've made bad jokes about, I wouldn't a bit more take my car that seems to be functioning perfectly to a mechanic and say, just look it over, because God knows they'll find a ton of things wrong with it. So that was always my philosophy with the doctors. I don't go looking for trouble. And I think there's a problem, I'll talk to the doctor. I never took vitamins, nutrients, ate healthy, went to the gym, nothing that could be considered healthy and wellness. I was just in survival mode, and because everybody was healthy, I was good. And I sadly made other jokes about wellness and holistic and homeopathic. I mean, you name it. I just thought that was so much nonsense. And I made some tasteless jokes as a result that I've had to apologize for. And then it hit me. In the blink of an eye, my entire health changed. Literally, I went to bed one night, I was fine. I woke up the next morning, and I was in crisis. I was faced with a major health challenge for me. I mean, it can always be worse, of course, but my pain was consuming and debilitating. I mean, I can take pain. Again, I have 4 kids. I did natural childbirth. I know what pain is, and this was serious, serious, take your breath away kind of pain. Well, a few days or weeks into it, I was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, and I was ordered to have back surgery. But instead, you know, they gave me a nice little neck brace, and I learned that if I slept in a recliner, the pain wasn't quite so bad. And I had some amazing happy pills or narcotics. You know, I was living on narcotics. And although I was refusing surgery, I didn't have any rational plan for improved health. I mean, I was just on, you know, coasting by with my brace, my chair, and my drugs. I mean, that was it. But just so you know, I'm not completely and totally rebellious. My reasons for refusing surgery was that, first of all, I told you I've been a single mom. My nest is empty. There was really nobody around to take care of me, to help me if there was a surgery that I could avoid. You know, if it was life-threatening, of course, I probably wouldn't have had that option. But in this case, I felt like I did. So I didn't think I had that as an option. I've been self-employed for a very long time, and we're now obviously in the midst of a challenging economy. And I knew that if I didn't work, I wouldn't eat. And so that didn't seem like an option for me either. But maybe the most important part of it, if I narrowed it all down, was the fact that I didn't know anybody who had had just one back surgery. Everybody that I could think of that had had back surgery, it seemed like that was, you know, a lifetime cycle for the rest of their life. And if I could avoid that in any way, I was bound and determined to do that. But even though I was determined not to have the surgery, I wasn't open and minded about a natural approach. It's not like I was saying, well, I'm not getting surgery, I'm going to try something else. I was just coasting by, just trying to go through life with my condition, not looking for anything. But you know, truth be told, as stubborn as I sound and as easy as I might make it sound, the reality of it is that I would have eventually had to surrender to surgery, or I would have had to have been addicted to narcotics. There's no question. Without narcotics, I couldn't bear the pain. So something would have had to have snapped. So it sounds, you know, great for me to say I wouldn't have had surgery, but something would have had to have snapped. And so I was accidentally and gratefully introduced to a protocol that worked for me in spite of me. So again, I wasn't open to it. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't open to listening to anybody. But I'm very thankful that a friend of mine that I respect deeply just kind of broadsided me with trying something and made me make the commitment to give it a shot. So really, when I tried what I tried it for my friend. I really didn't try it giving any merit to it whatsoever. But the profound results that I had by just a simple change opened my eyes to a new world and, frankly, to a much, much bigger problem. You know, they say that curiosity killed the cat, but, you know, instead of celebrating my recovery when I had such great, profound results and celebrating a lack of pain, I really wanted to understand why and how that could be. I mean, I guess a lot of people might just take it for granted and get back up and say, wow, I'm sorry, I'm glad I don't have that pain anymore. But that wasn't enough for me. I told you I'm skeptical, you know, and I wanted to know why and how I could have had a change. And after all, you know, the surgeon was adamant. It's not like the surgeon said, well, maybe someday. The surgeon was adamant that I needed to have back surgery. So if that were the case, how is it possible that I could feel good and be pain-free and no longer need that radical treatment? Frankly, if I didn't have the pain associated with what the surgeon told me, I probably would have believed the surgeon just wasn't telling me the truth. But I knew the pain I had, and so I believed that it was in need of radical treatment until, you know, I tried this. So curiosity may have killed the cat, but I was on my own mission to understand things about my body, about the human body, that I had never taken time to even think about, never entered my mind, but I was on a mission now. I wanted to understand how something so simple could have a profound impact on my health. So that set me out on my journey. And in my quest for answers for myself and to better understand how and why my body positively reacted, I gained a tremendous amount of knowledge. And quite frankly, much of what I learned, I wish I hadn't. Because, you know, once you understand something, you have a better understanding of something, and you get into the ditches, sometimes it's hard to hear. I mean, some of the things that I know are frightening, and it can be depressing and overwhelming. So some of those things I wish I didn't know, but it's a little too late now. Now I know. And with that knowledge, I believe comes responsibility. I think that we're morally and we're ethically obliged to help other people when we become familiar with something or knowledgeable about something. It's our responsibility to share that with others. So, you know, we hear a lot about our health care crisis, and I'm not going to discuss that. It's on a political platform, and we do need something to happen for our country's healthcare system, no doubt about that. But frankly, I think the bigger problem is our health crisis. Our health crisis is epidemic, and maybe if our health crisis wasn't as epidemic as it is, perhaps health care would be a little bit more affordable for everybody. But we have a problem, and it's time for all of us to take what we call all-out massive action. You know, you cannot make serious changes by sitting back and thinking about it and pondering it. It's time to wake up, and it's time to speak up. And you know, I've been jarred awake by my situation, and speaking up is what I do and what I'm not going to stop doing. So it's my mission to make a difference, and again, my mission to inspire you to do the same thing. One of the things that was startling for me that I found in my journey, my quest for answers, is again an emphasis on the crisis that we're in with our health, and the fact that the United States is number 38 in the world for health and longevity, and frankly, that's dropping. And that bothered me. I mean, I know there are a lot of countries, but this is the United States. And the fact that we would be number 38, in fact that we rank just under Cuba for health and longevity, no offense to Cuba, but this is the United States. I just could not believe that we would fall below them for health and longevity. Japan, on the other hand, is number 1. So I wanted to know, what are they doing that we aren't? And, you know, as I was first looking into this and spending my time and talking to people, of course, the first response I would get from people when I would state this is that, well, you know, their diet, I mean, you can attribute that to their diet. They eat rice and fresh, you know, fish, and that's why. Well, you know, that's certainly a contributing factor. I mean, they do eat a lot better than the Americans do. But truth be told, when Japanese migrate to the United States and they continue with their diet protocol, and they don't change anything about that. They don't go through the drive-through for a Big Mac or anything else. They have the same statistics for their health that we Americans have. So something is wrong here on our land. Something's wrong, and I believe it's all environmental. I just couldn't understand how the leader of the free world could be so far down on the list of health and longevity. I couldn't understand, since we are the leaders, we have the, you know, every medical test imaginable, you know, things that are just incomprehensible that we can do medically. We have these tests, we have a pill or a protocol or a therapy or a treatment that can, quote unquote, fix everything. Nothing cures anything, but we have an answer for everything here. It just was so hard for me to understand, why are we getting sicker and why are we dying earlier? And I do want to say something before I go to the next slide. I want to address people that might have children or adults in their life with autism. When I talk about autism, I don't want you to think I'm saying, you know, autistics are sick and diseased. That's not what I'm saying, but there are a lot of things that's impacting our health and making us sick and pushing us to death earlier are things that are also impacting our children with autism. Startling fact, excuse me, I skipped a slide there. Startling fact number 2, autism is completely, totally off the charts. We have a huge problem that none of us can ignore, and I would hope that you would be inspired that even if you don't have an autistic experience in your life, that you would listen to what I'm going to share with you now and that you would take action as well, because eventually you will. So you may not be dealing with this directly, you may not go through what these parents are going through, but eventually, based on statistics that I'm going to share with you, you will. The 2007 survey reports were startling enough, and that stated that the autism rates at that time were 1 in 88 children across the U.S., and in fact 1 in 68 on military bases. Well, that I didn't like. Being a military mom, you know, at the time that I read this, I had 2 kids in the military, my son and my son-in-law, both serving in the United States Air Force, so that bothered me. I'm like wondering, why in the world would autism rates be higher on a military base? And in my uneducated mind about the whole picture here, I believe that's environmental. Nothing else made sense to me. The 2011 survey reports that 1 in every 50 children are stricken with autism on the spectrum, and we don't have military reports yet. It's probably good for this mom, because I don't know what I could be expected to do if I heard those reports, but 1 in 50 is enough. So I ask you, you know, when is enough enough? It wasn't that long ago that we were hearing 1 in 10,000, and now we're hearing 1 in 50. And frankly, you know, I hear this all the time where people say, oh, well, we have a better means of diagnosing, and well, the spectrum's getting wider. It really doesn't matter. If you were a parent, or are a parent, excuse me, of a child on the spectrum, it's a problem. It doesn't matter at what level on the spectrum, there's a problem, and we need to figure out what that is. Many, many people will blame immunizations, and I'm not saying, I don't want to start a battle here online, I'm not saying that immunizations aren't a problem, but I think they're a bigger problem. You know, in other words, when you consider that immunizations might be detrimental to the children, I think what you have to look at is the fact that the mother also had immunizations and the grandmother had immunizations, and a lot of these things that are a problem for the children are compounding. So, and you also have to look at the stats in other countries that defy that logic about immunization. So I'm happy to share some reports with you about global autism rates. With so many parents and so many professionals focusing on the problem and the protocols, why does the rate continue to climb? I mean, a lot of people have looked into a lot of things. They've taken action, you know, things like the immunizations and dietary things, and it seems like action's being taken. And I know from just a limited amount of moms and dads that I'm dealing with that are looking for answers, these people are actively making changes. So if everybody's kind of tuned in to making changes, why does the rate continue to climb? You know, we've even heard of parents that had a child on the spectrum and changed everything. I mean, they refused the immunizations, and they didn't do milk products, and they went gluten-free, and they just did every imaginable change, totally changed their entire lifestyle for this child, and then went on later on to have another child on the spectrum. So explain that. How can you do all the things that they're telling you might be a problem, and you still have a problem? We need to figure that out. Startling fact number 3 is the cancer rate. Boy, oh boy, did I get mad at this one. The cancer rate in America today is 1 in every 2 males and 1 in every 3 females. And you know, I've even asked medical professionals if they know what the rate is, and frankly, most of them could never answer that question. Some of them questioned me about the numbers and went on to research and come back and apologize. That's the rate of cancer in America today. And I have to tell you, as a mom and a grandma, that's not okay with me. If you look at the odds for your family, it's not good, folks. I mean, I look at my own family. I have 2 boys, 2 girls, and so we have 3 females, 2 males, and sometimes I look at those stats and say, I've got to work harder, because the odds are not good when you look at 1 in every 2 males and 1 in every 3 females. In fact, cancer is the #1 cause of death for children under the age of 14. And, you know, wasn't that long ago, you know, that the #1 cause of death for children was drowning, and now it's cancer. And we act like that's the norm. You know, there's something wrong with that. We continue to stay focused on cures, and nothing's curing cancer. We treat cancer. Nothing's curing autism. We treat autism. You know, we don't have cures, but we put a whole lot of focus on cures, and we ignore the possibility that we could have prevented it. Now, maybe some of that is personal. You know, it's hard to admit things. Maybe you don't want to take, you know, ownership of it. I don't know. Maybe you just can't conceive that something simple could have had this, you know, detrimental effect in your life. I don't know. But we need to focus on prevention. The problem with prevention is it requires action. You know, we can't just think about things. If we're going to prevent things, it actually requires that we take action to do something to make a difference. Did you know that we've known the cause of cancer, in fact, in every chronic disease since 1923? In fact, Dr. Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize for this discovery. He actually was awarded the prize in 1931. But he discovered in 1923, and again, this is where the root of prevention, if you can find the root of the problem, you have the root of prevention. It's a very simple fix, quite frankly. Among the 12 major types of childhood cancers, leukemia and cancers of the brain and central nervous system account for more than half of them. So again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I can't help but wonder, is it coincidental that autism and the leading cancer in children are both central nervous system related? I can't help but wonder that. What's up with that? Why wouldn't it be cancer of something else? I mean, why is it the central nervous system? And I think that there's a correlation, and I believe that it's environmental. I guess we can't say, as I'm ranting and raving, you know, that we haven't been warned, but the best way to put it is to say that we didn't know we were warned. Someone introduced me to this research study, and I'm going to introduce it to you. It's actually entitled Reducing Environmental Risk of Cancer, What We Can Do Now. And it's a free publication. It was done with NIH, National Institute of Health, and the President Cancer Panel. It was done, presented to the White House, and it was done, completed 2008-2009 is what it says on the cover of the book, so it's a few years old. It's free, ready, and available to every American. They won't even charge you postage. But there's just one problem. You don't know that it exists. So in my skeptical mind, I can't help but wonder, is this kind of a, you know, cover yourself document that they've provided the research out there, but we don't know to look for it. So someday they could say, well, we tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. I don't know. But on page 7 of this document, there are several things I want to point out here on the next couple of slides. that just shook me to the core, and I'm sure they'll have an impact on you. But this is on environmental contaminants in children. I'm going to skip down to the bold part where it says, ideally, both mothers and fathers should avoid exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals or hormone disruptors, in case you don't know, and known or suspected carcinogens, which are cancer-causing chemicals. So not just if they're, clinically known to cause cancer, but even if they're suspected to cause cancer. We need to avoid them prior to child's conception and throughout pregnancy and early life when risk of damage is greatest. So if you just ponder that for a minute and look at what you're reading, consider it, I should say, what we're hearing is they're saying that the problem isn't just with mama and what mama eats while she's pregnant. The problem is with mama and papa and long before pregnancy. And they know that these chemicals, exposure to these chemicals and carcinogens are disrupting the growth and development of our children. They already know that. They're already telling us. They're saying avoid it, at all costs before you get pregnant, during the pregnancy, and throughout the early life of your child. So how many people know that, and how many people know what to do? Another thing that they say is we can avoid the exposures in simple ways. I want to call out a couple things to you. And it starts out by saying individuals and families have many opportunities to reduce or eliminate chemical exposure. Well, who knew? I certainly didn't know before I started getting myself up to speed on these things. The first thing is family exposure to occupational chemicals. So at first glance, you might say, well, I work in an office, my husband or wife work in an office, we're not exposed to any occupational chemicals, so that one's not for us. We don't need to take off our shoes and et cetera, et cetera. But I want to challenge you a little bit because, most of us are exposed to these chemicals. We may not be through our occupation, but we're exposed. If you play golf, for instance, you're really exposed. You're out on a golf course that is full of pesticides and chemicals, and if you come through, when you come through the door and don't kick off your shoes or change your clothes or whatever, you're bringing those chemicals right into your family home. And I know that's a difficult one because I have a lot of men just roll their eyes at, golfers that I know, and they're like, that's so ridiculous, unless they see a problem, they don't believe there's a problem. But I also see a correlation with some of these friends of mine that have small pets, for instance, that jump up and, want to be up, kind of up on their legs and stuff like that as soon as they come in the door. And their dogs have major, major problems. So I'm sorry, I think that does apply to us. If you have a beautiful lawn that you fertilize and you use pesticides to kill the weeds and you go out in your lawn, you're exposed to these chemicals. So it doesn't just work for people that are occupationally exposed to these chemicals. It really applies to all of us. The next one is interesting because it addresses water. In fact, the next two address water. The first one is basically addressing your home water. So it talks about filtering home tap or well water can decrease exposure to known or suspected carcinogens and disrupting chemicals. Well, there you go. Again, I live in the country. I do have a well. I'm grateful for that, but I don't feel safe because of it. There are a lot of people that say, well, we don't, we're okay with our water and everything. We're not exposed to any of that stuff because we have a well. Well, if it's ever rained in your area, you got a problem. If anybody's ever grown anything, crops or anything, you have a problem. Any groundwater contamination with a well, you'll eventually have a problem. I don't know how deep your well is or how many years it will take to get there, but trust me, you'll have a problem. And I think they know that because they're saying that we need to decrease our exposure and filter it out. Unless the home water source is known to be contaminated, I think that's kind of relative. I was in real estate for a long time, and when houses would change hands and there was a well, of course, they would do a water test, and, sometimes it failed, and they were really looking for E. coli contamination in the well, but how many chemicals are really being tested? So who knows if their well or their water source is contaminated? But it says unless it's known to be contaminated, it's preferable to use filtered tap instead of commercially bottled water. So for those of you that say, oh my gosh, I wouldn't drink my tap water if my life depended on it, I'm going to buy bottled water, you basically just heard there is no safe water there. If you have well water, you basically heard you still need to clean up your act. So we have a major problem here with water. And, they're not going to come out and say, in the public, of course, we can't have bottled water because that's a tremendous commerce in our world. Billions and billions of dollars and thousands of jobs go into commercially bottled water. So the best thing they can do is say use the water you got and work with the water you got and filter it. And we'll talk about filtration here shortly. Then he goes on to talk about storing and carrying water in stainless steel glass or BPA-free containers to reduce exposure. Oh, isn't it interesting that the government report, the NIH and the President Cancer Panel and the White House, they all know that there are problems with the water bottles. They're not saying unless your bottle is known to have been in the heat. You cannot put water in a plastic bottle that we know has toxins without it leaching into the water. But having said that, the argument over the hot bottles, I've had so many people say, oh, well, I get those out of the store and then I take it home and then I put it in the fridge. Well, you don't know what the life of that bottle was before you ever bought it. You don't know how many years. Was it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years sitting in a hot warehouse somewhere? You don't know how long it was in the hot back of a semi-trailer as it was being brought to your area. You don't have any control over that water. And, if the government's saying you're better off drinking your tap water, work with what you got, I'd work with what you got, because they don't usually say things until they know there's a huge, huge problem. Of course, they're quietly saying this. So look at the plastics, reconsider using the plastics. And, my son, it breaks my heart. My one son in the Air Force was in Afghanistan, and, it was 120 degrees over there, and there wasn't anything to drink but the bottled water, and they're pretty primitive. He was with Special Forces. They didn't have luxury accommodations or anything, so the water wasn't cooled at all. And he said, Mom, I can still taste that, that water with it just tasted just like plastic, but we were so desperate to have something to drink that's what we drank. Shame on us for feeding that to anybody, much less our people in service. This is really startling, and a word that you'll hear a lot from me at any given point in time. It's on page 111 of the same document that I'm referencing. But if you'll skip down to, again, the bold print, it says numerous environmental contaminants can cross the placental barrier to a disturbing extent. Babies are born pre-polluted. How sad is it that we can look at the greatest gift, this perfect gift from God, this perfect baby that has skin like silk and smells good and sounds good, this perfect part of our lives, and understand that inside they're pre-polluted, and we've done it. So when I say I've poisoned my kids, I know that I've had a role in this, and I know that the contaminants passed on to my child. But isn't it startling to hear them say, that the contaminants can cross the placental barrier to a disturbing extent? It used to be that, as we were pregnant, of course, we took precaution and, you don't drink alcohol, smoke cigarettes, and do all these things. In fact, I have always loved coffee. It's been my comfort food because I'm the last of 6 girls, and it was the one thing I did with my dad. Starting when I was 4 years old, he would just put a little bit of coffee and a lot of cream and sugar, and I felt like I was having daddy time, so it's my comfort thing. But, I was really blessed that when I was pregnant with all 4 of my kids, and I drank coffee all day long, I didn't get sick, but I just didn't want coffee. My body shut down. It knew not to drink the coffee, and I'm grateful for it. But, those things are the only things that we really focus on. What we have trouble accepting is the fact that our lifestyle, our exposure from the food we ate, the air we breathe, the water we drink, all the things that we've done for generations are coming out through the placental barrier and pre-polluting our babies. It's got to stop. Children can also be harmed, reading further, by genetic or other damage resulting from environmental exposure sustained by the mother and in some cases the father. And again, I'm no doctor or scientist, but it appears to me that they're saying that being exposed to this environmental problem can cause a DNA issue, because if it crosses from the mother and the father, it only makes sense to me. I could stand corrected, but that's a very scary thing to think that your family's pre-polluted, that this beautiful child, all of them, frankly, but thinking about a newborn, when you first get this child, that this child is pre-polluted. Well, to make it worse and to break it down a little bit, the Environmental Working Group, it was a study spearheaded by them, where researchers found as many as 287 toxic chemicals in newborn babies. They tested the umbilical cord of newborn babies, and this is what they found. If that doesn't make you sad, mad, and all the above, I don't know what would. 180 of these chemicals are known to cause cancer in humans. So you wonder why cancer is the #1 killer of our children. That is one equation to it, of course. And then 217 of them are toxic to the brain and to the nervous system. So again, I, can be a skeptic, but I'm making a correlation here that, the cancer, the #1 cancer for our children is related to brain and the nervous system. Autism is related to the brain and to the nervous system. And here we are looking at newborn babies where 217 of the toxic chemicals are toxic to the brain and to the nervous system. It looks like we got a problem, Houston, and I think it's environmental. 208 cause developmental problems. And you know, the sad thing again is that the womb is supposed to be the safest place in the world. And when our babies are born and then they're later diagnosed with something, whether it's be a physical illness or autism, they're on the spectrum, you know, it's just devastating. It's devastating. And I think it's very difficult by human nature to look at what role we could be having in that. But we need to accept that, as hard a lesson as it is, and as hard a pill as it is to swallow, we need to be sure that the womb really is the safest place to be in the world. You know, we're told all kinds of things, you know, safe levels. I mean, it just kind of makes me laugh. I don't know how there could be safe levels of harmful things. And toxins are toxic, period. And poisons are poisonous, period. You try to smooth it over by saying safe levels, but, you know, aren't safe levels relative? If you were talking, for instance, about chemicals and municipal water, for instance, and they've tested these based on their anticipated use of whatever it is. So if it was the chemicals, known to cause cancer chemicals and city water, and they did their study and said, well, let's equate, you know, every individual having one shower or bath a day, but you take 3 or 4 showers because you do, well, you're exposed a lot more to the chlorine, to the chemicals than anybody else would. It's saying that it's safe is all relative. You know, how much arsenic would you be willing to feed your family if you were told that there were safe levels? You know, just a little bit of arsenic, a little bit more arsenic. Then, you know, this is a real chemical, a toxin that we're dealing with. But if you called it for what it is, it's a little scary. So how did we become so numb and that we just blindly trust all is well with the world? How did that happen? I don't know if we're just too busy. I don't know if we're too trusting. I don't know what it is. I just know we're in crisis and all is not well in our world, and our kids are paying the price for it. You cannot continue to see the stats for cancer, for autism, for a multitude of other, you know, chronic conditions and say all is well. It's not okay. But quite frankly, it starts at the top, and we have to do something to reverse the damage that we've done for the next generation. And in some ways, you know, it's all in a name. I mean, good grief, you read some of the names of these chemicals and toxins, and it's so foreign. I mean, I can't even begin to, you know, pronounce these names, or even they're huge. Sometimes I wonder who makes these names up. But human nature is, you know, if we don't see it, in other words, if it hasn't bitten us, if we're not impacted by it yet, and we don't understand it, we just don't confront it. So I think we read labels, for instance, and we say, well, you know, the FDA wouldn't let something bad be in there. Well, think again, folks. You know, we're talking about commerce here. You've got to look at what the names are. You've got to look at what it is. You've got to become educated. So, you know, if we're told that known carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals, are offered us in safe levels, think again. You just saw what the government report is saying is avoid them at all costs, even suspected ones, much less known ones. We need to, you know, you can't say it's a safe level. You need to avoid them at all costs. And if you had knowledge about the chemicals, would you think twice about feeding them to your family? And I think that answer is yes. I mean, your life is going to change if you take the message seriously. If you understand the root of the problem, your life has to change. So, you know, would you do something about that, or would you just continue to feed it to your family? Some people ask me as I'm going through this, you know, well, how in the world do you get rid of all the toxins that are there? What do you do? You know, well, you know, that's one of the primary reasons I think we're in a health crisis, and we have to stop it. So to me, the step number one is to avoid the exposure at all costs. Again, we've already been told that in black and white with a research study from NIH. We already know that. We have to avoid it at all costs, which means obviously that you have to change your lifestyle. You have to become knowledgeable. You have to make a commitment. But we have to avoid further exposure at all costs. And then it's all about letting your body you know, take care of business and start detoxing and get, you know, get some of the existing toxins out while you're trying to avoid any future exposure whatsoever. So avoid them and then detox. Well, how do you detox? Well, I think it's kind of funny because I don't have a medical background. Didn't focus on wellness and all these things, that some of these detox protocols are just pretty shocking. I mean, they're just way over my head and they make my head spin. But if you choose to take a radical detox route, you remember that, you know, unless you're stopping exposure and limiting or reducing or preventing exposure, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to be detoxing if you're going to continue to get the toxins in. And you can't possibly successfully detox without lots of healthy water. It's not possible. Your body, you know, water's the source that the body uses to flush out waste, and including toxins. And without healthy water, your detox efforts will be lame. So, you know, really it's kind of a protocol, all-round protocol. But somehow, in everything that we've done, we've forgotten the importance of water to the human body. That was one of the most impactful messages for me. I never drink water, but the body is 70% water. So how can you look at 70% of what the body needs and discount it or diminish it and say, just, give me another Diet Coke or give me another Gatorade or whatever? How can we discount that? The body is 70% water. It needs water. There's no replacement for that. And, unless it's healthy water, you might as well drink the Coke. So not only do you need water and need lots of water, but you need the right water. So that's a huge part of your protocol and a huge part of successfully detoxing of some of the chemicals. So, now what? So knowing the stats, is there anything that you wouldn't do in an attempt to avoid a crisis in your own family? Now, that's a tough question. Is there anything that you wouldn't do? Because, you're going to have to be inconvenienced. So are you willing to be inconvenienced? Change is always inconvenient, especially when we get in the groove and just live life and we're in the fast lane or we're in the, rat's race or whatever you want to call it. It's taking the time to learn and to change is always inconvenience. Are you willing to be inconvenienced in an attempt to avoid a health crisis in your own family? Would you be willing to nix your microwave, get rid of it? We already know it permeates radiation, but, did you know that it kills every nutrient and anything you put in it? God forgive me for all the meals I prepared for my family with the microwave. Would you be willing to stop drinking sodas or Gatorade or vitamin water or whatever those things are, any bottled water? Would you be willing to stop drinking those things that are harmful to you, which makes it harmful for the next generation? Would you do it? Would you be willing to give up harmful foods? Forget if it tastes good. Would you be willing to give it up if you knew it was harmful, if it was creating a long-term, beyond just your own body, but to the body, to the future of the next generations? Would you be willing to do it? Would you be willing to, change your ways like I did, my hard-headed ways? Supplements, why do I need supplements? But simple things. For instance, we run from the sun like it's the plague, but the body needs vitamin D. So there are a lot of people, especially my age, that need, supplements. They need vitamin D or B12 or whatever. Would you be willing to at least look at a natural approach to that? Would you be willing to change your water source? You've already, you've heard people share with you. You've certainly seen what the government report says from NIH. We got a problem with water. Water is not water. If you think that the water you're drinking out of your tap is the same as it was when the earth first formed, we need to go back to real basics and educate you on water, because it's not. And your body is crying out to get rid of toxins. It's crying out for hydration and healthy water. So would you be willing to change your water source? Would you be willing to take that step? Only you can answer that. So, but something's got to happen. There are 3, on the invitation to this webinar, it said you can go green without going nuts. And I kind of simplified it because otherwise it would make me nuts. But they're the top 3 non-negotiables in life for health and wellness. Number 1, you need to breathe the cleanest air you can breathe. Absolutely breathe the cleanest air you can breathe. You need to eat the purest food you can eat, and you need to drink the healthiest water you can drink. So that's a short list. There's a whole lot that's involved behind that as you raise your awareness, of course, but that's a manageable list. Watch what you breathe, watch what you eat, and watch what you drink. It's pretty simple. But, none of these are optional, and none of these are negotiable. The body needs all 3 to be healthy and for wellness and to fend off any further environmental issues for us and for our family. There's no room for error with any of them. So if you're not willing to do all 3, which one of them would you eliminate? It's interesting that, I have people that are really careful, I guess, about the air they breathe, and they have air purifiers, and they only do organic, and, they don't eat meat, and they've given up milk, and they do all that stuff. But they really don't care about what they're drinking, about the water they're drinking. They don't give a second thought to it. So which one of these would you give up? None of them are optional or negotiable, not one of them. So I think that if you're going to embrace a change, you need to embrace a change for all 3, because they're all vitally important to your future. So if you're going to be as healthy as you're only as healthy as the air you breathe, what can we do, for heaven's sake, to be sure we're breathing the cleanest air? Well, some of them are obvious. I mean, there's been a battle over the secondhand smoke for a long time, and frankly, major strides have been made. I mean, I can still remember the old days of walking into a restaurant and just being hit with cigarette smoke, but they've made, tremendous strides with secondhand smoke. But there are other things, chemicals, again, spraying chemicals and carpet cleaning, mold, if you have black mold in your home, anytime you're painting or sanding something, there are a lot of things that you can do to be careful of what you're breathing. But on a more routine basis, and what really gets us down to brass tacks with our home and our family, is looking at things inside the home. The commercial air fresheners and scented candles, boy, We ladies love things to smell good. That's a huge market. If you ever doubt that, go into that section in the store and just look at how many commercial air fresheners there are and how the multitude of scented candles. Forget about it. There are more natural ways to get the same result. Cleaning chemicals and carpet cleaning chemicals. Oh my goodness. It still astounds me that people will have their carpets cleaned and bring home their toddler and they're crawling all over the rug, and it's just amazing to me that people have this natural assumption that if it wasn't safe, they probably wouldn't put it on my carpet. Well, it's so wrong. Pesticides and aerosol, beauty and cleaning products, etc. Install that filter on your shower head to avoid exposure. Now, why would I say that for breathing? Well, it's kind of obvious. You get in a hot shower, and the steam hits the shower, and the chlorine's in the steam, and you're breathing the steam, so you're getting a mega dose of chlorine and toxic air when you take a shower. So that's such an easy fix. Go to the hardware store. It's $20, $30 or something to replace your shower head with it. Quit breathing chlorine. But an interesting thing to note is that, again, I was in real estate for a long time, so we learned about things like this. But granite releases radon. Granite is rock, of course. It's a natural product, and radon is a natural gas that comes from soil and rocks and stuff like that. So it comes out of most radon, and radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer. Over the last several years, my goodness, I've had several people that I've heard of that I will hear, oh my goodness, so-and-so has lung cancer, isn't it sad? I didn't know they smoked. A lot of these people didn't smoke, but they had granite, so who knows? They, maybe radon, because they do attribute radon as being the second leading cause of lung cancer, second only to cigarette smoking. And then you're as healthy as the food you eat. Well, that's just a loaded topic, and it's a long topic, and there may be a lot of changes that we need to make, but we need to wake up to what's being fed to us. Buying it in the supermarket, nicely packaged and beautifully merchandised, doesn't mean that it's healthy, folks. We've got to wake up. We've got to avoid things like genetically modified food. If you don't know what that is, you need to go learn what that is. It's a major problem. We need to read labels and understand what they mean, and we need to avoid chemicals and pesticides at all costs. Try to buy local whenever it's possible. I'm hoping, my own sons are going out on a garden venture to do hydroponic, or, as close to organic as you can get produce. And I'm so happy, because we need to have local options wherever possible. If you don't have access to that, and frankly, if you can't afford it, because buying organic is expensive, and it's particularly expensive if you're trying to feed a family. So if you don't have access to it and you can't afford it, you at least remove the oil-based pesticides on your fruits and veggies before you eat it. Pesticides that they use for commercial gardening, I mean, that's resilient stuff. It's oil-based, and sometimes you can tell a kind of a waxy exterior to a fruit or vegetable. It's made to resist the rain. Otherwise, the poor farmers, every time it rained, they'd have to go out and respray the crop. So it's resilient stuff, and you're not going to wash it off with just tap water. It's not humanly possible. It might make you feel real good about it, but you can't remove these pesticides just by sticking them under the water in your sink. And worse, is that vegetables absorb chlorine from your water. So if you're sticking your vegetables under your municipal water and trying to make them clean, you're making matters worse, because now the vegetables have actually absorbed the chlorine. So it gets worse and worse. And chemical cleaners to clean your vegetables make absolutely no sense. But do something to remove those pesticides. For me personally, one of the protocol that I've used, my primary protocol, I use restructured water to wash all my veggies, including the organic. And you wouldn't believe, because it's got an option for a very high alkalinity, it will basically dissolve the pesticides on the food that we're eating. And not only do I feel better feeding that to my family, eating it myself, but boy, I tell you, I never knew the difference in the way things can taste when they don't have that residual pesticide on them. And then you're as healthy as the water you drink. We need to wake up to what we're drinking. I told you that we've already seen from the government report, that's, substantiation. You've already heard about the problems with the chemicals and the pesticides, and God knows there's a lot of chemicals in our waters. But we need to wake up to what we're drinking and quit being complacent. Quit looking at a clear bottle of commercially bottled water with a pretty label on it and thinking it's healthy, because it's not. The single most important thing any of us can do for our health is to drink healthy water, and lots of it. Now, why do I say that? Because, frankly, if you eat really healthy food, only the best, and chemical-free and pesticide-free and non-GMO and all organic, and you're washing it down with a bottled water, for instance, that we know has cancer-causing chemicals in it, what good have you done? you're basically canceling out your efforts unless you look at the very most important thing your body needs. You can go, a little while without food. You can go a long while without food, but you're not going to go very long without water. The body needs healthy water and lots of it. So municipal water, in my opinion, is not an option, as it takes hundreds of chemicals to make recycled sewage potable. And I know that sounds like a very crass way of putting it, but I have to confess to you that I was in real estate for a very long time, and I had no idea, it never sunk into my thick head that municipal water was just recycled sewage. It never dawned on me. I thought they were taking, river water or surface water or something and cleaning it up to make it potable. But when you think about it, it's really the epitome of recycling. If you think about it, you use the restroom and you flush the toilet and it goes into the municipal system and the solids are separated and the clears are filtered and they're treated with up to 300 chemicals and they're put right back in your tap. It's like the epitome of recycling. But, there isn't a pitcher on the planet, Brito or whatever the zero pitchers are, I don't even know them all. There isn't a pitcher on the planet that's capable of removing all or even most of the harmful chemicals in your tap water. It'll go a long way in getting rid of the chlorine, and that's a good thing. But there's not one on the planet that's going to get rid of what you need to get rid of. Bottled water isn't tested or regulated by anybody, so if you think it's safe because it went through the government process somehow, you're wrong. FDA doesn't, test or regulate bottled water, and it isn't from a spring somewhere, and it is bottled in a toxic container. That's just fact. So you can kind of, whitewash that in your mind a little bit and think your container was never heated so you don't have any chemicals, but we've already been over that. It is in a toxic container. So most bottled water, frankly, is just dechlorinated municipal water with a different spin. It's marketing at its best to take tap water, put it in a new bottle, different label, and sell it right back to the communities again. And both are a prime example of what we talked about earlier about safe levels of toxins. I mean, isn't it relative? If they say that your water has safe levels of these carcinogens in it, doesn't it really matter how much water you drink? It's all relative. So it's kind of a silly thing to be telling us. But changing my water and committing to drink lots of it is just what the doctor ordered for my health. That's the simplest change that had a profound impact on my health. That's what I changed. I gave up, all other drinks, and I went on to water. My source water is called Kangen water. I also discovered that as part of the Japanese protocol where they have used Kangen water for 40 years. So I think they know a little bit more about what they're doing than we do. So I feel really good about that. It's the only water that I'll drink, and I don't need surgery. I feel like $1 million. I sleep like a baby. So you couldn't pry my Kangen water out of my hands for anything, and I'm living proof it works. But all of my children and my grandson, thank the Lord, are all drinking nothing but the best. So on a note before I go to the next slide, I wanted to say that, since I can produce 7 different levels of pH with my machine, it's a little complex to go into now, I've been able to go green and eliminate all harmful chemicals from my life. So everything from my household, cleaning and everything. So when I said you can go green, without going nuts, that's the way I started my journey. I'm able to accomplish a lot of things with just one change, and that's my water. I may not be wealthy. I've never been wealthy. I've been wealthier than I am these days, but I've never been wealthy. But I'm not cheap either. And my family didn't grow up having every luxury, but I didn't skimp on the important things. If they needed braces, I found the money. And, what did that mean for me? Well, I just had to work harder. I was self-employed, I told you. I just had to work harder. If it was a priority, they needed braces, I found the money. I thought that was important for them to have a healthy mouth, to have a nice smile, so for them to go forth in life. In fact, I was talking to my daughter, who has my only grandchild. He's 17 months old, and she's already telling me she thinks he needs braces, which is comical. But she was talking to me about affording braces, and I said, she asked me, how much did you spend on braces? I want to say that over that period of time, it was something like $24,000. $24,000. I'm not wealthy, believe me, but I found the money for the things that I thought were long-term, for the big picture, important for my family. When it was time for college, I found the money. I didn't get help from, another parent of theirs. I didn't get help anywhere. I found the money. I thought it was critical for their future that I do what I could do to educate them. When there was a need for tutoring, I found the money. One of my kids got into high school and math. I mean, there's no doubt he has my genes because math, I mean, I can do basic math, and you get into other math, you lose me completely. I'm confessing, but that poor child couldn't get any help from me. And so if we didn't get him on track, there was no way he could graduate because the mandatory math classes, he was not going to get through. And so we went out for tutoring. When I got the tutoring for him, it was not an easy time of my life. It was $600 a month, but I found the money because my son needed to get through that phase in his life. That was a priority for me. When they needed sports equipment, you know, my sons didn't have a man in their life. Their dad was not a part of the picture, and I thought sports and that whole team camaraderie and the male leadership and all these things I thought was important for the bigger picture in their life. It wasn't recreational sports in my mind. This was a big deal for them. When they needed sports equipment to play effectively, not $400 baseball bats, but when they needed what they needed to do the best job they could do, I found the money. When it was time for church camp, I had 4 kids. I'll never forget the first year they all went to camp. They were young. And it was the first year they would all be going at the same time. And it was $1,000. This was a long time ago. It was $1,000. I found the money. And I was grateful that I had the money. To me, to feed them spiritually, that wasn't an option. It wasn't fun and games. I thought that was an important part of their life. I have always found the money somehow. If I had to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, work harder, whatever it took, I have always found the money for the important things in the life of my family. So why would health changes be any different? Why would that be any different? There isn't any amount of money in the world that I would trade for the health of my family. So you need to invest in your health now, or guess what? We're going to pay for it later. You may not even see it in your lifetime, but you're going to see it in the next generation because we've already seen that what we're doing with environmental issues and toxicity, we're passing right on for the next guy. So it's going to happen one way or the other. But here's just a short list of some of the things that I changed, you know, so you can see practically. Number one thing, of course, would be open my hard head. I was skeptical and hard-headed, but I opened my mind and I changed my lifestyle. Of course, I had an experience, you know, from going from chronic pain to no pain and not needing surgery, so that helped my journey. It helped inspire me, I should say. But I had to open my mind and I had to change my lifestyle. I had a serious talks with my family, and I apologize for being a bad example. I'm sorry, but I think we need to take responsibility in life, and that was a biggie for me because I really thought that I had done such a great job, and I did do in so many ways. But when I pondered, you know, for instance, my baseball players and how many Gatorades I ran out to the field and how I always opened their home up for their friends, and I made sure they had plenty of pizza and Coke and Mountain Dew, and oh my gosh, when I think about all those things that I did out of ignorance, of course, I still felt like I needed to, you know, set an example for change and tell them that I'm sorry, I made mistakes, and I hope you'll learn from me. I got the microwave out of the kitchen, and I lived with the inconvenience of it. I changed my water and actually started drinking lots of it, and I didn't care what it cost. I don't know how you put a price tag on restoring health for my family and not having surgery, and I don't know how you put a price on it. I know people do. Frankly, I didn't care what it cost. I did it. And I think in the long run, I spend so much less than my friends who refuse to think about bottled water. They just buy bottled water. You know, they say that the average person spends $640 a year on bottled water. Can you even imagine? So in the long term, I'm sure I'm doing much better off than they are, and I'm going to have a healthier generation because of it. I made a commitment to stop using BPA plastic for anything. I don't care if anybody tells me lukewarm, cold, never been hot. I don't care. I'm not using BPA for anything. I'm going to stop that for our health and also for the sake of the environment. I've never been an environmentalist. Again, I got to confess, I was selfish and blind, okay? I never cared about any of that stuff, but I was talking to a company the other day about their water and the number of employees they had, and the bottom line is that they have 500 employees, and I said, you know, if just half of your employees drank 1 bottle of water a day, which is probably conservative, by the way, that ends up being, I think it was 65,000 bottles of water a year. And if you measured that all out, it's almost an acre of land. So just one little company with half of their employees drinking 1 bottle a day could fill an acre of land. How pathetic is that? So not only am I not doing it for the sake of our families, but I'm not doing it for the sake of the environment either. I gave up 99% of fluids, Diet Coke, etc. I confess, man, that's what I drank. Diet Coke and coffee. I don't even know how I didn't have a major problem long before I did, because I did not drink water. I drank Diet Coke and I drank coffee. That was pretty much it. And I replaced it with the best water that I could get my hands on. Again, you know what? It's not a matter of me thinking I'm worth it, although we should all believe that we're worth it. It's a matter of me knowing my family's worth it. And I can't just go barking out orders and changes when I know There's an environmental problem, and I know the toxicity is passing on to my grandchildren. I cannot go forth without being a good example. So for me, that was stopping everything else and getting the best I could. Then I started reading labels and researching what I didn't understand. I mean, again, making a change is not necessarily convenient. It's going to take time, and it's going to take energy, and it's going to take commitment. But personally, I think our kids are worth it. I traded TV time for awareness time. So anything that I could find that I could read or look up online or watch a documentary or go to PubMed and validate things that I was seeing, you know, I was spending a lot of time to raise my awareness. I quit using household chemicals to clean and traded them instead for pH balanced water, which is too complicated to go into on this call. But the bottom line is, for instance, if I adjust my pH on my water to a high level pH, which in my case is about 11, 11.5, that's the same pH as ammonia. And it's the pH that cleans. So I can get the same impact that ammonia will get, but I don't have any chemicals. So in fact, I could drink it if I want to. It's non-toxic. So I feel really good about that. I made sure that all my fruits and veggies are pesticide-free. I even soak organic produce. You'd be surprised, because as long as it's out there in the elements, believe me, between acid rain and, you know, not toxicity, environmental issues, you know, whatever, even it's out there, it still needs to be washed off, even though they haven't purposely put pesticides and things like that on organic foods. It still needs a good shake of washing off. And I share what I learn, and I vow to make a difference. Those are really the primary changes that I've made. But you know, actions always speak louder than words, and there's something I've preached to other parents across the years or over time has been, you know, you can't just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. You can't just bark at what you want your kids to do, or you've got to actually do what you want them to do and be a good leader. So unless you're willing to walk the walk, it's useless to talk the talk. And I recognize that, again, that I'd done my fair share of poisoning my kids, and I had to work hard to turn that around. And by confessing those mistakes that I told you, I had a long talk with my kids, by confessing those mistakes to my family, I had a huge impact on them. And guess what? They're listening. I didn't say to them, oh, I didn't know any better. I'm still going to drink my Diet Coke, but you shouldn't. No, they saw me make tremendous changes, and they were very grateful that their mother was out of pain, didn't need surgery, and over time they got to see the differences. So, you know, they're listening. They've all joined me in drinking only restructured water. They've all nixed the microwave. I'm so proud of them. And they're all reading labels. So I am making a difference, at least in my own family. My young son changed his water and frankly was able to kick his complimentary Ambien habit. Thanks to our United States military. I love them and glad my family served. But you know, when he was in Afghanistan, they worked on like 12-hour shifts 7 days a week, and he was with Special Forces, so he saw and heard an awful lot that was going on. I'm sure sleeping was a problem, but they hand out Ambien like it's peanuts. And then when he got back stateside, he was having trouble, you know, sleeping, so he'd get another prescription. And all his mother could do was try to be gentle and pray like a maniac. But I'm very grateful that he came to me a couple months ago and said, Mom, I listened to you, and I've been able to wean myself off of Ambien, and I haven't slept this well in years. I feel so good. So I'm grateful, you know, I'm just grateful. So I'm leading by example. I'm not taking health for granted, even though I have it. I'm focused on keeping it and changing for my children. And I'm not accepting our health crisis. I refuse to see these numbers grow and grow and accept it. I refuse to sit back complacently. And I know I'll be called a crazy person, and I really don't care, because I'm doing the right thing to do, and I hope I'm doing it with passion. I think you can probably sense that. And I hope I'm not stepping on toes. But, you know, sometimes the truth does hurt. And sometimes we do have to go through a little pain before we can turn things around and make a difference. So, you know, what about paying it forward? Well, we've been real good about paying bad things forward. I mean, we've managed to pass along toxins, I mean, out of innocence, of course, but we've managed to do that from one generation to the next. And ignorance is not bliss in this case, because if we remain ignorant and we don't make changes, you know, it's just going to keep paying forward bad things. So we need to pay forward positive things. The next generation deserves a fighting chance. And again, I get sad and overwhelmed and almost too overwhelmed to keep sending this message off when I think about what will happen if we don't do something. You know, if our autism rates are 1 in 50 children, my goodness, what's going to happen? But I can't think like that. I just have to keep fighting and keep trying and keep talking to people like you and keep trying to spread the good news. So we can't really think about what will happen, but we can think about what will happen if we do nothing. I don't know how, in good conscience, we can continue to do nothing. So what will you do to make a difference? You know, now you have a little bit of knowledge I've shared with you today, and, you know, what you do with it is your business. I feel like my ethical, moral responsibility is to share this message with people. And then what they do with it is their business. So I'm hoping and praying that you'll want to make a difference and that some of what we said today will have had an impact and you'll want to do something about it. I do appreciate your time today. I'm going to go to the screen now and see if we have any questions that need to be fielded while we're on. I do want to thank you for your tolerance. I know my patience can sometimes get to people, and so I thank you for that. I also encourage you to get back with the person who invited you to this call and continue discussions about how you can make changes. And if you have any questions or comment, I do see one. I'm going to paraphrase this long question, but it's basically saying, how can you use water to do all the things that you're talking about? And you know, it's complex. I mean, I do want to share with you, or if someone invited you to this call, you really do need to learn about what you can do with water. But it's basically a matter of pH. Everything in life is sustained by the right pH. From your blood. Your blood needs to be 7.35 to 7.45, I believe is what it is, pH. And if it's not that, you're dying. So if you're in crisis, for instance, and you go into the ER, one of the first things they do is check your blood so that they can see where your pH level is. Because if it's below 7.35, you're dying. And you know, if they find it that way, they add bicarbonate soda, which is basically a purified version of baking soda that they'll add to your IV so that they can raise your pH level, your alkaline level in your body, and your body doesn't have to fight so hard. And then so, you know, everything relies on pH. Our bodies do, and the pH that I talked about for the veggies, I mean, it's just a matter of pH. If you think about in the old days, lye, making lye soap, lye is still a major ingredient with our cleaning products, with our detergents and, you know, all of our cleaning products. And what makes lye work is not that it's some magical formula, but because of its pH. It has a very high pH, and the pH is what, the high alkalinity is what dissolves the stain in the dirt and that sort of thing. So that's a Reader's Digest version of what I'm talking about with the water, and, you know, you'll be fascinated to see what all you can do with this. There is one other question here that talks about autism. And they're basically asking if I'm giving all of the blame to autism to toxicity. And I guess the safe way to answer you is to say, again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, but I can say in my own mind and in my own opinion, yes, I think that we have a toxicity issue. I think that it's going from generation to generation, and I think until we address that, we're going to continue to have a problem. I don't want anybody to think I'm pointing fingers and telling parents, oh, it's all your fault that your kid is suffering with this. I mean, you didn't a bit more, you know, get careless with your child than I do with my child. I mean, I did everything to be the mother of the year. I just, you know, didn't understand. So I think that, yes, I do think that's part of it. I can tell you that I have a nephew who has a little boy who is now 8 years old, and he is on the spectrum. And when he was introduced to water, my water actually, Kangen water, he had the most profound changes. And we actually have some family videos that show the differences in him. And I think that part of this was for him, that just by hydrating him, you know, remember I said if you're even 1% dehydrated, you lose 10% capacity. So just by hydrating him, but his difference is all of his gut issues went away, his attention span, it's so far improved. He has had, I mean, just hardly any emotional outbursts. So it has been absolutely phenomenal what's happened with him, and we're grateful for. So, you know, I'm not saying I have all the answers. This is really my opinion of where we are and what I wanted to share with you today, but I do wish you well on your journey. So again, I want to thank you all for being here today. Get back to the person that invited you. Email with me with any more questions that you have. I have some more comments on the screen, but no other questions. But you can talk to the person who invited you. Email me. I want to wish you the very best for you and your family, and I'm just going to pray and hope that you're willing to go pay it forward. Have a great day. Bye-bye.